listening to the Construction Big Breakfast, where we give you a hearty serving of insider tips and business strategies to help fuel your day so you can thrive in the construction industry. Now, here's your host, Tip Top Tim Fitch.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. You're watching the Construction Big Breakfast. I'm Sarah Hall, Communications Consultant at Invennt. Today we have our director, Tim Fitch, and Jason Le Masurier here as our guest. We're really excited for you to join us, and thank you so much for all the recent subscriptions. And we're going to dive right in. Tim, how are you doing today? Jason?
Great. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Jason. Well, I'm obviously tip-top because we're filming this on a Friday, just before the bank holiday at the end of August. So looking forward to the weekend, although the weather looks a bit rubbish. You'll know this by the time it's gone out. Really excited to have Jason on the podcast this morning because he's got a very interesting story to tell, and he's doing some very interesting stuff just now, which is what we're going to talk about. But those of you that are regular listeners will know that the first question that any of our guests ever get asked is, well, Jason, today, what did you have for breakfast?
I had my usual big bowl of porridge. I always have a big breakfast and I add all sorts of other things to it, berries and bananas, and so it's a great big bowl of, it's my main meal of the day, I suppose, my big breakfast.
Yeah, and I'm interested, how long does it keep you going? How long does that keep you going?
Oh, brilliant, because oats are quite a slow release carbohydrate, so they get me going all day, and if I have a good breakfast in the morning, I can go through till the evening without really needing much. So it's a good way to start the day. I'd recommend it to anyone. Big bowl of porridge.
No, it's very healthy, good for cholesterol. Yeah, very good.
Yes.
Come on, Sarah, what did you have?
I'm on my second cup of coffee and I had a smoothie, although I'm sure Tim would have preferred me to be eating some pancakes and maple syrup this morning. But I'll save that for next week when I'm in Canada. So
okay, well, that's good. Yeah, well, if you look on Facebook, you'll see what I had, because I've got into making. We had some what do you call them, wraps left over. So wraps. I had some tinned tomatoes, which I've flavoured up with some chili and whatever, and 2 fried eggs on top. So that was a good 400 calories. And if I don't have something like that, I run out of steam by about 11:30. And for me, porridge, that's exactly what happens if I have porridge. I get to about 11:30 and then the carbohydrate's gone. But anyway, everyone's got slightly different metabolisms, haven't they? So anyway, that's enough about breakfast. If you want to have a look at my breakfast, go have a look on Facebook.
Yeah, the weather's not looking too bad up here in Donegal at the moment. You said the bank holiday's not looking too good, but the weather's up here in Donegal is pretty good.
Well, the sun shines on the righteous. So that's interesting. So Jason's speaking to us from Donegal, but that's obviously not where you originally hail from. And you've got a very interesting backstory, big journey in the last 10 or 12 years. Could you, for the benefit of our viewers, just give a very brief overview of what happened?
Well, what happened was it was a kite-surfing accident. I was lifted up there about 20 feet and then landed on my head on the sand at Blackpool Beach. Now, how on earth I survived that is a miracle to start with. That the air ambulance then took me to hospital, and when I got to hospital, I scored 3 out of 15 on the Glasgow Coma scale, which is as low as you can go without being dead, really. So I was that close.
Yes.
And that at that level, there's a 95% mortality rate. So, I'm just so lucky to be here. And then following that, I spent 2.5 years in hospital. And just before I left hospital, the doctor, my consultant, told me that they tried their best, but they couldn't get me walking. And he said, "You're never going to walk again." So that was like a red rag to a bull as far as I was concerned. It was like a challenge, he set me a challenge.
Yeah.
And then a month later, I was having races with my son. My son was 14 months old at that time, and we were both trying to walk at the same time. So we were having races together to to be first to learn to walk.
Wow.
There's not many people that could say they learned to walk with their son.
No, that's astonishing. And of course, your son was conceived just before this accident.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. My wife was 3 months pregnant by the time of the accident. So what she went through was just unbelievable. You know, to go through 6 months of pregnancy with me, you know, it was a real roller coaster. You know, on the verge of death a few times on that way. And I don't know how on earth Liz survived that. And then once I'd come through that bit and learned to walk, she was a single parent with Jack while I carried on in hospital with my rehab for another 18 months. So it was a very difficult time for Liz, and you know, we both came through it, and we're doing great now. After I'd done the very unusual thing of learning to walk with my son, my next goal was to walk down the aisle at our wedding. Because we would have been married before my accident if, you know, everything had gone okay, but we got married afterwards. And then when it came to the wedding, I did another very unusual thing. I actually ran down the aisle away from Liz. So I've got a video of me running down the aisle into the arms of another woman. Which is a pretty unusual thing to do in a wedding, I think.
But considering what happened, it was a big statement, wasn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I was doing it to prove to everyone there, my family and everyone, that I was back, not just walking, but I was able to run at that stage. So, jog anyway. So that was a great thing.
Sounds like you and Liz went through a lot, and she must be a very resilient woman to have gone through all that as well.
She is incredible. She's, you know, if I wouldn't be here without her, definitely. And yeah, but it was just a series of then goals. You know, the first goal was to learn to walk before my son. My second goal was to walk down the aisle on our wedding day. Then the next goal was to learn to ride a bike and swim again. And then once I got running, riding the bike and swimming, I said, well, why not put it all together and do a triathlon, as you would, you know, what else would you, why not? So Liz and I entered the Skipton triathlon together, and I can't tell you the satisfaction we had going back to the doctor who told me I'd never walk again 4 years before, and asking him to sponsor me to do a triathlon. So,
what was his reaction?
Incredible.
What was his reaction to that?
Well, but I said to him, look, please don't ever take anyone else's hope away, you know, just, you know, expect, you know, you never know what's possible. And I said, well, unless it was inverse psychology, I just, you may have just been winding me up to see what I could do, but I certainly did rise to the challenge you set me, and this is where I am today. So he did sponsor me in the end, actually.
Well, that's nice. There are people without accidents who can't do triathlons. So, I mean, I'm one of them. Never. That's astonishing. Well done.
I've gone on to run marathons. I've run the Dublin Marathon as well now. And I mean, this is one of the key things about my workshop is TIC, stands for Thrive in Crisis. Yeah. So although I was a pretty fit guy before my accident, obviously I was kite surfing and things, but I'd never really done much running. So the accident basically brought this out. You know, I actually managed to thrive. You know, I had this major crisis on my hands, but I managed to come through it and actually do even better in terms of physical fitness, and I'm now fitter than I ever was.
Let's just go back a step, because you just mentioned something you're doing now. So you've had this tremendous period of recovery and rehabilitation, and you've obviously physically you're beyond where you were before the accident in terms of being able to run triathlons and marathons and things like that.
Yes.
But what is it that you before the accident you were involved in civil engineering, and you're an academic, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely, yeah. I was at the time of my accident, I was actually working at Canterbury University in New Zealand as a lecturer in construction management. Now that had come out of my PhD, which is on management in construction, and obviously once I'd got my PhD in management and construction, then I managed to get the post out in New Zealand, and it was an incredible job. I love New Zealand. but the accident was back here, and I was back on the sabbatical in the UK, and basically the accident really cut me off from New Zealand then, which is, you know, one of the bad things about it all. But there's a lot worse things about it. But no, I mean, I'm lucky, as I say, I'm lucky to be here, so making the most of all the things I've lived, you know, I've survived with, and try to do something better than I did before.
And we'll just dwell on this a little bit, because obviously I know the answer to this question. The PhD, when you said it was in construction management, it was focusing on developing the observational method to look at other forms of risk other than ground movement.
Exactly. Yes. So the observational method has been used for many years very successfully in the construction industry. Originally put forward by Ralph Peck. Terzaghi and Peck used the observational method very successfully on many projects, and it was the way that they always worked. And it had been used, all around the world, but not so much. And one of the things that Peck said was that there are two ways the observational method is used, and he called it ab initio, which basically means, which is the way he and Terzaghi used it, which was from the start. Ab initio means from the start, and actually seeing that was the best way of achieving the cheapest and most efficient construction in ground conditions. You never know what you're going to find, and we all know that it's the ground conditions that often throw a spanner in the work, and you come across things that you never expected. And so the observational method manages the risk and the uncertainty and gives you the best outcome. And the other way, he said ab initio is one way. The second way is called best way out, which is the way it has been used a lot, because it's, sometimes you end up in such a state, with the problems with, unforeseen ground conditions we all know about. So that's where it's come into its own, really, in terms of it's the only way forward once you've had a disaster in a construction site. And sorry, if I can go on a bit here. I'd say the biggest example of its use in the UK, the most successful example, was on the recovery works for the Heathrow Express tunnel at Heathrow. When they were building the tunnels for Heathrow Express, they were using sprayed concrete linings, so Natam basically. But because of the culture on the project, there were some problems with it, and the tunnels collapsed. And the way they actually resolved the problem immediately was to pump the ground full of concrete to stop the tunnels collapsing anymore. So in a way, they created a bigger crisis for themselves, because the collapse of the tunnels was bad enough, but then filling the ground up with concrete created a much more challenging situation. But the secret to getting out of it was the observational method. They ended up with this big excavation that was full of concrete, and the only way to remedy it at the time was to build a big cofferdam around the whole collapsed area and then dig it out. And the observational method was used very effectively to manage the movements and the uncertainty in that process. So if I can go on a bit more about the Heathrow Express, which is probably very relevant, because it's, that's where the origins of observational method are from, which I've gone on to develop further. But anyway, the HSE did their investigations into the collapse. And one of the key findings of the investigations was that although the ground conditions were very uncertain, it was the culture and the lack of communication and the lack of collaboration in a way between the parties that really caused the disaster. So this was my case study of my main case study of my PhD was on the Heathrow Express, and at the time Sir Alan Muir-Wood was involved in my PhD as an industrial partner, and he said to me that whenever you've got a complex project with a lot of complexity, he said that one of the bigger uncertainty, the bigger complexity is the culture of the people involved in that. because at that time, I think, if anyone can remember back to there, that the construction industry was very adversarial, particularly between the designers and the contractors and the clients, and it was a lot of conflict between the parties. I mean, these days we've got a bit better with the new engineering contract and more collaborative arrangements like partnering and alliancing, which have improved that whole cultural issue in a way. But at the time I thought to myself, well, if we're applying the observational method to manage the uncertainty in the ground, then is it possible to apply the same technique, the observational method, to managing the uncertainty in the human behavior in the team? Because that's the bigger uncertainty.
Yeah.
So I then, thinking about this, I thought, well, the observational method is really just a generic approach to managing uncertainty, and this is my PhD, which is, the title is Developing the Observational Method as a Systemic Approach to Uncertainty Management, because I like to use the word uncertainty rather than risk,
Right.
because uncertainty contains both risk and also opportunity. So if you manage uncertainty well, you not only minimize the risk, but you also maximize the opportunity.
That's a very good point.
So, I mean, you're talking to a person who studies soil mechanics, and I actually, very briefly, I know you knew him well, met Ralph Peck when he was in his 90s, one of his visits to London. And of course, vicariously, I happened to be sat in one of Balfour Beatty's offices in southern England the day that collapse happened. And if you ever want to see, what shall I say, pandemonium break out in an organisation, that was a pretty good example of it, understandably. There's no criticism there. So we've got these two. We've heard what you're doing before: academic, construction management, PhD, applying the observational method to more generic management of uncertainty. Now, this terrible accident, the journey through rehabilitation, and reaching new physical peaks. But how have those two things come together? What is it you're doing now, Jason, to say capitalize on it, but to create something out of those two very different strands to your life?
Yes.
To inspire and help others, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. But conveniently, they merge together. The two biggest challenges I've had in my life have been my recovery from accident and also my PhD, and I've managed to merge the two and come up with a process which I've developed into a workshop. And I do speaking now. I do. Well, I'm a member of the Professional Speaking Association, which is basically people who make their living out of speaking. So I speak on this subject, and the way I've merged it together, the PhD and the recovery, is the fact that I had a major crisis with my accident, and there was a lot of uncertainty about how I would come out of it. And I was able to thrive in my crisis, as I've described before. And I just mentioned there that Winston Churchill is famously quoted as saying, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." So this is the idea behind, trying to do something positive with what I've gone through, and what, something that will benefit other people. So the first part is thrive in crisis. TIC, I call it TIC. And that's based on this idea of it's resilience, really. How do you actually use a crisis to your benefit rather than be defeated by it? I describe the difference between a crisis and a catastrophe is the same as the difference between trauma and death. For my situation, I had a very traumatic accident. If I died, it would have been a catastrophe.
Right.
But it was a crisis, a major crisis. And so, as I said before, wherever you've got a crisis, you've got risk, but also opportunity. So what I then did was I said, well, the observational method is about observing what's happening and responding appropriately to that. And I've summarized that as take opportunities consciously, which is when you've got a crisis, as I said, you've got a lot of risk, but also a lot of opportunities. And so to take the opportunities consciously is about observing, all the data that's coming to you and everything that influences your decisions, and then acting appropriately based on what you've observed, what you've discovered. That's talk. And the third part is I call it clock, and that's based on another part of the observation, which is about contingencies. So contingencies cover the worst possible scenario. When you're dealing with ground conditions, it could be any number of dewatering situations, or as they did on the Westminster box for the underground, they used tube en manchette underneath the Big Ben. So if Big Ben started to lean a bit, they'd pump some grout into the ground and push it back into place. So that was their contingency, was a way of preventing settlement that might have caused Big Ben to start leaning. So this idea of clock, contingencies let opportunities commence, is the fact that once you've got the worst case situation covered with the contingencies, that kind of frees up your mind a bit. You think, well, that's as bad as it could be, and I've got something in place that will cater for that. But if you so that frees up your mind, and you think, well, what are the opportunities then? I've got the risk, I've got the bad thing covered, so I'll start looking for the opportunities. And so we've got tick, tock, clock. And I say that in order to tick, thrive in the crisis, you've got to tock, which is take opportunities consciously. And in order to tock, you've got to have contingency in place, which is clock.
Right.
To tick, you need to talk. To talk, you need to clock.
Tick tock clock, I love it.
So you've created this sort of framework, and as you run workshops to help people explore this.
Yes.
Have you been running those workshops during this world crisis that we have going on right now too? I mean,
yes.
We're in such a huge crisis around the world. It seems like a good opportunity to be teaching that to people and how they could make this into some kind of an opportunity.
Exactly. Yes, that's my main focus now, and this is providing me with a great opportunity.
Yeah.
And there's a saying I heard once that the opportunity of a lifetime lasts for the lifetime of the opportunity, as in, this is my opportunity of a lifetime to actually do something useful, positive with what has happened to me and help other people. But the window of opportunity is there for as long as the crisis is there. So, this is what I'm aiming at. And I think my model can help other people see a way through this and not be defeated by the crisis, like I could have been defeated by accident, but to actually be, I'd say resilience is about not only surviving, but actually thriving, actually using it to your benefit and actually go forward with something else. And I've heard the saying, bounce forward. If you bounce, like I bounced on my head,
right,
use the momentum to take you forward rather than bounce you back, just saying, oh, well, I'll go back to where I was before. And I think this crisis that we're going through at the moment is actually going to, in some ways, is going to improve the world, because certainly on the environmental side, it's potentially going to make a big impact on the climate change and the all the environmental problems we've got. Because, as we all know, that a lot of the airlines are going under, so we're going to stop a lot of air travel. And also, there's all sorts of ways that if people can be positive, they can actually say, what are we going to get out of this? What can we do that's better than we did before? So
Yeah.
that's I think another good example of that is Christchurch in New Zealand, which, as you know, had a major earthquake, but they're very resilient. I think the Kiwis tend to be very resilient people, and they're actually now making Christchurch into an even better city, a smart city. It's sort of rising out of the ashes to be better than before. And just coincidentally, when I was working in Canterbury University, my main research area was on post-disaster reconstruction, which is a bit ironic, but
yes,
and
yeah,
that was particularly focused on the contractual situation after a major disaster. When it comes to rebuilding, we were saying that the best way to rebuild when you've got a huge amount of uncertainty and confusion is using an alliance. You know, the construction alliance, and from the contractual point of view, is the best way of dealing with that kind of major situation. And so this is another thing that I'm bringing into my workshop, is the fact that resilience is about coming back better. And Christchurch is one of the best examples of that, and Heathrow Express as well. So the two major disasters in the construction industry and in New Zealand are coming into our workshop, and this is it's all backing up what I'm having to say, and that it's not just my ideas, is actually proven in reality. Heathrow Express has proven how effective the observational method is, and Christchurch is showing how resilience helps you do better than you did before.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll speak as we find, because Jason very kindly ran one of these workshops virtually with the Invennt team just before we all broke up for summer, and he combined it with sort of an inspirational talk, which went into a lot more detail about not only the accident but the long road to rehabilitation and recovery, followed by the TikTok clock workshop, all done virtually. And I know from my own team's feedback on my own, what I think and what the team thinks, it was a profound event. And of course, people are still thinking about the TikTok clock model. And talking about disaster recovery, I mean, one of our team, Sarah, was in Beirut when that explosion happened 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And there's a city that needs to be rebuilt, and obviously they're in the actual very early days of. It was a catastrophe for some people. It's absolutely a monumental disaster, but it would be interesting to see whether the Lebanese can respond to it, perhaps in the same, as well as Christchurch.
Right.
Time will tell. Time will tell, won't it?
Yeah. Well, the workshop. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's our experience of Jason's workshop. It's I thoroughly recommend it. It's thought-provoking. It's moving, obviously, with the story. And it's an interesting model, which is very, very relevant, not just for COVID, but for things like Beirut. So, Jason, if anyone who's watching this would like to get in contact with you, what are the best ways of them reaching out?
Well, my email is quite simple, jasonlemasurier@gmail.com. I also have a website, which is jasonlemasurier.com. I'm on all the usual social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and I can be contacted through any of these. And the website's under development at the moment, so that's going to be improving and incorporating more on the TikTok clock workshop, which is going to be rolled out into a program of workshops that I can deliver to people who are trying to survive in the crisis that that we're all going through at the moment. Mm-hmm. And also, I think maybe the Brexit crisis, which might have been
yes.
Yes.
Well, what we'll do, and Sarah knows how to do all this.
Yeah, so I'll put everything on the screen there, and then there'll also be a link in the description box below. I want to also thank you very much for coming on today, Jason. That was really inspiring to hear your story firsthand, and hear how you've come out of it. And I want to thank everybody who's watching. We really appreciate all your subscriptions. If you've enjoyed hearing Jason's story and you'd like to share it with somebody who could gain some insight from it, please share this video on any social media platform. It's going to be airing on iTunes and our YouTube channel. And we'd appreciate it if you give the video a like or comment what your thoughts are, any feedback that you have, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks so much for watching.
Thanks. See you next time, everyone.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Construction Big Breakfast. Make sure to visit our website, www.inventt.com, where you can subscribe to the Construction Big Breakfast on all platforms so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a positive rating. Or if you'd simply share it with a friend, that would help us out too. Be sure to tune in for our next episode.